Слава Україні!
Hello everyone, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day. I hope that everyone's having a lovely Saturday, and I hope that everyone is being safe, that you, your family are safe, and if not, I hope that you all find that safety and security in the very near future. There's been a ton of stuff that's happened throughout the entirety of the world. A lot of stuff that's been ongoing in the country of Ukraine, of course, and a lot of stuff that's been happening in other locations throughout the world, where you're talking about the Middle East, Africa, the United States, Europe, Asia. Doesn't really matter. There's just a ton of stuff going on. And a lot of this stuff happens to usually not be good. Well, that's fine. We're never doing super chats on this channel. We're never doing any kind of merchandising because we are the news that gives back. 100% of everything that we do here at the New News is charity driven. So what we're doing is we're trying to raise money to try and help people throughout the world deal with these crises that are affecting them and maybe even affecting some of you as viewers. So I do hope that you guys will continue to give that support. Check out the video description below. You're going to see a ton of different organizations. 80% or more of all the proceeds these organizations receive go to their programs. They go to helping people. So please be sure, check those out. And if you can't give a lot, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. One of the biggest things that you can do is to help us grow this community, help us grow this channel. The more people that are here and the more people that watch this, overall, the more good we will be able to do. At some point, we would like to be able to put a fundraiser on every single live stream, so that way we can raise money as we are streaming throughout the night. And we hope to raise $1 million at some point doing that. So that is what we're going through. That's what we're going to be doing, once we get to that point. And until then, help us grow the channel. Help us, tell your friends about us. Let your family know about us. Share us on some of your communities, on your Discords or whatever you're doing. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, comment on our stuff, ask questions. That it all helps us grow. It helps us, do the good that we are trying to do here. It helps the project, and I can't thank you enough for the support you guys have already given us. I woke up today, 187 people are watching this regularly, enough to have subscribed. That's crazy to me, because I didn't expect to have that many people ever. I never intended to actually do YouTube at any other point, at really any point in time. I kind of thought about it offhand for some gaming stuff, but I never thought of myself of kind of a YouTuber kind of thing. So it's crazy to me that 187 people care about any of my useless facts. So it's nice to see. Thank you very much for all of the support you guys have been giving me and giving to this channel and giving to these organizations even more so. Well, with that, we're getting ready to roll directly into the news. We have a bunch of stuff that's going on, and before we get there, I please implore you to ask questions. There is a ton of stuff that is happening. A lot of it is very complicated. A lot of it is stuff that has to do with military operations and what have you, and it's not something the average person usually will understand. It's very difficult to understand, why would they do something like this? Like, why is this important? And luckily I can kind of give some input there. To give you a little bit of an idea of my expertise, I was an 0352 anti-tank missileman in the Marine Corps. I was a corporal, and I served between 2016 and 2020. I was in the United States Marine Corps. And I did 2 tours. My first tour, I spent 4.5 months in the country of Syria, with 1.5 months I spent in Kuwait. My second deployment was in 2019 and 2020. I was one of the 100 Marines that responded to the Baghdad Embassy complex attack on New Year's Eve of 2020. And I also was there. I also served with the Crisis Response Company out of Kuwait. And I also trained Saudi Arabian Marines, which was down in the Red Sea. So I have my subject matter expertise are in anti-armored warfare. I am also a subject matter expert in armored doctrine, especially when it comes to hostile country armored doctrines, such as the Russian Federation and Chinese military doctrines for their armored warfare. And I am also I'm also fully cross-trained as a machine gunner. Of course, I am fully cross-trained as a rifleman as well. I received training in being a radio operator to some extent. So I do have a lot of expertise, especially with mechanized and motorized operations. So I will try to answer your questions to the best of my ability going forward, but do understand that those are still very limited, and I I implore you to please do your own research. Don't believe what everyone tells you on the internet, even if they do claim to be an expert in something. As we continue, so we're going to jump right into the news. We have a ton of stuff. If you cannot tell, there is a ton of stuff in Ukraine today. It has been very, very active. And as we jumped over here, we start our night off in Kyiv, where several different developments have taken place. The first thing we take a look at is civilian casualties. It's something that we haven't heard yet, or really heard very definitively over the last few months. And this is coming from Yevgeny Yenin, who is the first deputy minister of the Internal Affairs of Ukraine. And they say, quote, as of September the 3rd, Russian occupiers have killed more than 7,000 and injured about 5,500 Ukrainian civilians. Now, this does not take into account areas such as Mariupol, or Donetsk, or Luhansk, or Severodonetsk, or Lysychansk, or Lyman, or Izium, or Kherson, or Melitopol, because those areas are currently occupied and there is no way to verify any kind of amount of casualties out of them, and they will not be verifiable until after the end of the war. Just because, areas in places like Kyiv, Chernihiv, Sumy, these areas, they can kind of understand, they have kind of had some time to go through and determine, the dead and the wounded so far. So this does not include occupied areas, which there is quite a large amount of there's quite a large population that has been occupied. It's also crimes against humanity. I've stopped labeling these war crimes at this point. This is truly just crimes against humanity, because it's the scale. The scale is unfathomable. I mean, there's to see these numbers, you have to understand Ukraine's committing war crimes too. 100% they're committing war crimes. No doubt in my mind that there are Ukrainian troops right now who are executing a prisoner. Not entirely unheard of. I guarantee you that there has been Russian prisoners executed summarily, without regret. But it's the scale of this happening, and Ukraine does not have that scale. It's you're talking about, if at most, maybe a couple hundred incidents. Russia, according to the Prosecutor General's office here in Kyiv, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian troops have committed 31,506 war crimes against Ukraine and its citizens. 31,506 war crimes. That's insane. That is insane. That's incomprehensible. That is comparable only to, I think the only thing that could really beat the war crimes of the Russian Federation in a war is the Nazis themselves during the Holocaust, for instance. That scale. That's what you're talking about. This scale of war crimes is of a magnitude that hasn't really been seen since World War II. Truthfully, since about World War II. By two industrialized nations killing each other since about World War II. This amount of scales of war crimes just hasn't been seen. It's not the only thing. Of course, we get our child casualty update too, regrettably so. And, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 380 Ukrainian children have died. 737 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region. Once again, that's coming from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. And that leads us into a point that was actually provided to us by a member of our Discord community. Specifically, UC Will was the one that provided this, and I literally just copied and pasted what they had said. They had everything that we usually are looking for and try to put together here. So very good on them. Thank you very much for this, because I did not see this myself. But this is from the Human Rights Watch. Quote, we had no choice. Filtration and the crime of forcibly transferring Ukrainian civilians to Russia. This is a 70-plus page document that reviews the information and intelligence gathered on the filtration camps currently being used by Russia. The document finds Russia to be in serious violations of the laws of war, as well as committing crimes against humanity. Please be warned, this document does contain sensitive and disturbing accounts from survivors. Now, Human Rights Watch is an organization... Oh, uh-oh. what did we have here? There we go. So this is the summary of everything on. So this is their document regarding this. Okay. So Human Rights Watch is an international organization regarding, you know, human rights throughout the world, and they work. And this is a report, much like the OCSE, which created their report based off of the Moscow Accords. It covered about a 3 to 4 week period. This one is also going to be something that other countries and other organizations, such as the International Criminal Court and the ICJ, are going to be looking at to determine what they're going to be doing. This is the kind of reports that we're waiting to come out. These take quite a long time to put together, but 70 pages. These people put 70 pages together of survivor accounts of and of intelligence information regarding filtration camps or filtration points, depending on what you want to call them, within Ukraine. There's been some quite amount of comprehensive, data put together on these filtration camps. It's very, very simple overall. The filtration point system was developed in the late 90s, early 2000s during the First and the Second Chechen Wars. The filtration camps have been under international law. Incidents at these camps regarding crimes against humanity and war crimes have actually been they've been prosecuted for. During the First and the Second Chechen Wars, these places were known and are known now in this day and age for summary execution, rape, deprivation of sleep, deprivation of sanitation areas, deprivation of sleep, deprivation of food, water. You're gonna have constant beatings, torture, all of this. It's terrible. It's a concentration camp, is what this is. A filtration camp is a concentration camp of a new name. That is what it is. That is the reality. That is what this 70 pages worth of information is about. And more will be talked about on this for a long period of time, especially after the war is over. These are preliminary. You think that Human Rights Watch was allowed into what is essentially a concentration camp? No. This is just what we know from afar, let alone the horrors of what it will be for, when people get up close and personal with places like Penal Colony number 52, or places like Olenivka, or places like Bezimir. I mean, that alone is disturbing. And that alone, the idea of such, is difficult to ponder. But yeah, these are filtration camps, filtration points. They're just concentration camps. That's all they are. They're a concentration camp of a new name. And thousands of Ukrainians are in these locations forcefully. Their children are being forcefully deported. Likely, the remaining are being executed. As we continue on, we skip over Kharkiv for the night, and we end up down here into the Donetsk region that allows us kind of moving into the Donbass finally. The Donbass is the meat and potatoes of the war. This is where the majority of the action is happening in this war. Quite a significant amount of fighting, and we have a couple of different things ongoing here. First of all, Russian artillery continues to pound very key cities here within the Donetsk Oblast, and what we see is that here in Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, they continue to receive shelling. They received more shelling today. Both of them did. These precursor bombardments are because Kramatorsk is an especially vital logistical command, control, and communications hub for Ukrainian forces. Kramatorsk has a major railhead. It has a major roadways that run through it, and basically it is the key strategic city for Ukrainians here in this area to run operations up here into the northeast. And what we see is that there are precursor bombardments. In order to take Kramatorsk, the Russians would have to take Slavyansk. Slavyansk is the next kind of the next kind of rock they have to jump to, to get across the river here and to their goal. And here in Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, what you're seeing is precursor bombardments. Russian doctrine can be broken down into about 2 phases. It used to be 3, but it's 2 now. And those phases are very simple. The first phase is going to be precursor bombardment of a location to soften up enemy defenses and more or less completely demoralize your opponent. Constant shelling is pretty demoralizing. That hence why PTSD was originally called shell shock. Because of the intense amount of shelling during World War I, where the first real studies into that phenomenon really began. It was called shell shock, or it was called nerves, basically breaking of the nerves. It was, sometimes it was even called cowardice, but this amount of shelling, Russia is very emphasized on their artillery. They're very artillery heavy. A lot of it's saturation bombardments. These aren't precision strikes. These are, I want this from this road to this road. I want everything bombed. And that is about the accuracy of the Russians. BM-21 Grad system is a perfect example of this kind of methodology. BM-21 Grad system is a truck that has rocket tubes on the back. It fires 40 round salvos of 122 millimeter dump-fired Katyusha rockets. Basically the exact same thing. And it's basically the exact same thing as what was being used in the Battle of Stalingrad to level the entire city of Stalingrad. It's quite extensive, and it's not accurate. Saturation. Filling an area with as much lead and explosive power as physically possible. That's what we see here. Is just continual usage of artillery attacks as they're trying to soften up and demoralize the Ukrainians here. And probably this has continued further than we actually expected it to. We expected an attack on this area about the same time as the attack of Bakhmut. This may come down to manpower shortages, as the Russians just don't have the concentration of troops in this area to launch a ground offensive yet. Take a look. This is coming from Pavlo Krylenko's official Twitter. Pavlo Krylenko is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. These are the images coming out of Slavyansk.
В 2:15 дітей на пол і лежали в кімнаті на полу. В підвал же ж ми не побіжимо, бо з такими темпами ти не спієш ніде добігти. Реакція миттєва. Бо глупий все, хватаєш все, що є, саме цінне, і падаєш на пол.
В ванну залезла и пластик на голову упал. А потом вышла за двор, горит все. Мы сюда прибежали, тут кирпичи, там горят, там крики.
Пришли на работу, валялось на пороге у нас осколочки вот такие.
And then we also have the images coming out of both Slavyansk and Kramatorsk here. Once again, coming from Pavlo Krylenko. This is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. You can see shattered windows. Look at this crater, right? This is not... Keep in mind, these are mostly being dropped in residential areas, right? This crater alone. Keep in mind, explosives... you have your shape charges. You have the stuff that's meant to, crater things. You have your cratering charges, munitions. You have bunker busters. You have all sorts of stuff like that. But 90% of what you're going to be using is high explosive or high explosive dual purpose. Now, this is not. This is probably a high explosive round. And that means that most of the blast doesn't go down. It goes up and out. That's why mushroom clouds are formed by, one of the reasons. It goes up and out. It also has to do with like air pressure and airflow and stuff like that, in the heat. But explosions in general, they go up and out. They really don't dig huge craters. They're not meant to. now, unless they're specifically designed to do so. So for an explosive power, something that's high explosive, to leave this big of a crater, that is a lot of power. That is a lot of power, because that is, you know, what, 30% maybe of the explosive power to dig that much dirt out of the earth. You know, 70% or more is going up and outwards on this explosive. That is insane. And these are being dropped in and around houses. These are being dropped in and around, you know, hotels and residential complexes, apartment buildings, homes, schools, hospitals. We know that those are being targeted. So it's quite extensive, and it's insane to think about. You can see them fighting fires here over by Slavyansk and Kramatorsk here as the shelling does continue. And that actually brings us into the daily Donetsk update. This is 24 hours after the fact. Pavlo Korolenko does release a daily update regarding what has happened on the day before. Quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on September 2nd. 3 people were killed, 3 citizens were injured. And we actually have one of his posts that also reiterates this fact. That leads us over here into Soledar. Soledar is one of those locations that is also being shelled quite extensively, but there's also a lot of combat ongoing in and around Soledar as we were getting ready to take a look. And what we see is that here at Soledar, it was once again hit by rockets. This would be behind the outskirts of town. This would be hitting, you know, in residential areas, as you can see here. This is a residential building. This is an apartment building that has been hit with Russian rockets. Crazy fact, residential buildings in highly concentrated civilian populations aren't a military target. But the fighting is pretty up close and personal on the outskirts of town, as we can take a look of here. This is also coming out of Soledar. We have a couple of different things here. This is drone footage of some of the up close and personal battles of Ukrainian soldiers attacking Russian sniper positions. Take a look. So this is from the 93rd Mechanized Brigade, and this is them here by Soledar using an anti-tank guided missile that was captured on drone footage of hitting a Russian vehicle. See, good contact with that vehicle. Looks like it was a catastrophic destruction. Yep. Anything and everything inside that vehicle is dead. Then we can see this is up close and personal infantry fighting here. Whoop. Is this the same video over and over again? Yep. Oh, wait. I think we gotta scroll down here a little bit. Yep, never mind. I apologize, folks. But anyway, so quite an extensive amount of combat there in Soledar. We do know that the Russians did end up getting onto the outskirts of town and were actually fighting inside of the area around Soledar. But we did not. But it appears that the Russians have really stalled in this front. We're not seeing nearly as much activity here as we were quite some time ago. Literally just like a week ago. Before this Kherson offensive, they were kind of pushing, but they were also starting to slow down in areas such as Seversk and Soledar. Seversk is more of a supporting effort. Soledar, Bakhmut, all the way down to Resk are really the main efforts here all along this part of the front lines. But quite an intense amount of fighting. We do know that there is pretty heavy fighting in and around the Bakhmut area. We also know there's pretty heavy shelling along the entirety of this front as well. As you come down here, down to the south, we also see that up here in kind of the Donetsk region, the Ukrainian forces actually got themselves a trophy. They got themselves a BMD-2. A BMD-2 is a Russian paratrooper vehicle. They overran positions reportedly of the Russian VDV, which is the Russian paratroopers. And they ended up grabbing a BMD-2. BMD-2s are essentially the exact same thing as a BMP-2. They're a little bit less armored, but they do the same thing. The cool thing about the BMD and all of the BMD variants, the 1, 2, 3, and 4, is that their suspension, unlike normal tanks and armored vehicles, their suspension actually collapses down, so that way they can be airdropped. Essentially, you still need an airfield, from my understanding, but an air assault force or paratroopers can go in, secure an airfield. The aircraft can quickly fly in. They can roll these tanks out the back of them, or these infantry fighting vehicles out the back of them, and then they can lift back off, basically damn near doing a touch and go, and then they can go and they can get out of dodge to avoid that enemy air defense or being targeted. So the BMD2 and all BMD variants are basically the BMP, but they have smaller suspension, they have smaller tracks, and they're smaller vehicles in general, but they're armored vehicles that are more compact, so that way paratrooper units can use them kind of behind the lines before troops link up with them, so they have armored fighting support. They have heavier vehicles to support the paratroopers fighting behind enemy lines. Really cool vehicle, but it only has anywhere from about 12 to about 25 millimeters of armor, depending on where you're looking at. So really, anything above a 50 cal essentially will punch right through it. It's not very thick at all, and that's kind of something we see on most Russian vehicles. Is the armor just isn't very thick. Infantry fighting vehicles, self-propelled guns, reconnaissance vehicles, all of those are going to have APCs are all going to have about 12 to 25 millimeters worth of armor, and then you're looking at most tanks. If you account for the slope, it's about a meter thick on at least the upper glacis for most tanks. But you're really looking at about 600 millimeter, or you're really looking at about 600 millimeters or more, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, we see that there are major fires outside of Krystyakove. Krystyakove was formerly known as Terez, and here in Krystyakove there are several major fires. We do not know if this is because of a strike or if it is as a result of just a fire that has grown out of control. The key thing is that Russian military equipment was spotted rolling through Krystyakove earlier this morning. So we do know that there was Russian equipment there at one point. It appeared to have been passing through. We do not know if the Ukrainians went ahead and struck this location or if they did not. That information just is not clear, but we can clearly see Russian vehicles on the move here. And this is this new corps. This is the new corps of Russian troops that is being fielded into the battle space. You can tell that they have the brand new invasion markings. That it's a triangle with a circle in the center of it. This is the new Russian infantry, or this is the new Russian corps that they are fielding. It's fresh BTGs that they're fielding. Most of these guys have very little training from their time spent in Russia. They are relatively under strength for a corps. From our at least understanding, and it's not necessarily a great thing, but it really emphasizes the lack of manpower that Russia is dealing with right now to fight this war. There's just not enough troops. They have enough tanks in storage that they could be destroyed time and time again and replaced with something else. Maybe older, but something else nonetheless. The issue is finding crews for these vehicles, finding infantrymen. The casualties for the Russians have been astonishing, and while the Russian horde has been able to saturate a lot of those losses, there comes a point where you just can't take any more, and we're seeing Russian battalion tactical groups getting made combat ineffective left and right as this war continues to drag on. It is nothing more than a meat grinder at this point within the Donbass and along the front lines. It's a war of attrition, and Russia is losing that war of attrition. Take a look. Richard Sideburns is asking, are Bayraktars back in play in Ukraine? Bayraktars are back in play in Ukraine. We do know that they are back in play. Oh, look, they're playing a Scooby-Doo van, by the way. We do know that they are operating in Ukraine, specifically in the Kherson region. We had drone footage of them yesterday. But how much they are back in play is not yet known. We just know that they do still maintain a good fleet of them. Not very many have been shot down. There have been a few that were shot down successfully. Not a lot. And we can take a look here. Some of these fires ongoing. You can see the city's on fire. It's just an inferno. And we have some video footage as well.
Давайте разгоряется.
Да, сейчас будет лететь.
Once again, it would appear that those fires have kind of gotten out of control. Fascismo! Fascismo is the Italian word for fascism. It was conjured up by Benito Mussolini back when he took power. It's kind of a dystopian night scene here in the city of Donetsk, and fascism is kind of brewing here, as we can see. Quote, for the defense of, this is his translation, quote, for the defense of the motherland, to clean our dear lands of the Kiev occupants, to protect lives of women and children from, and then it just kind of fades out there, but just take a look. So this is a Russian call for cleansing.
На защиту Отечества. Очистить родную землю от киевских оккупантов. Защитить жизни женщин и детей от нависшей угрозы. Дорогие соотечественники. На защиту Отечества. Очистить родную землю от киевских оккупантов. Защитить жизни женщин и детей от нависшей угрозы. Дорогие соотечественники.
So, you ask yourself about child casualties. You ask yourself about war crimes, and the sheer amount of them. And 30,000 war crimes alone proves a point. Mariupol proves a point. The rhetoric regarding how horrible the strikes on Donetsk have been while leveling cities is pretty apparent and ironic. And then it's nice to have an in-house translator, such as we do. She does an amazing job. And being able to get in real-time translations from calls of ethnic cleansing in the city of Donetsk. This is not a war to take land. This is not a war to take land. This is not a war for political power. This is not a war to fight NATO expansionism. This is not a war for, to prevent the death of a people. This is not a war of defense. This is not a war to fight terrorism. This is a war of genocide. This is the attempt to exterminate a nationality and an identity. Nationality is covered under the Genocide Conventions and the Rome Statute. It doesn't have to be based off of an ethnicity. But when something looks like a duck and it smells like a duck, sounds like a duck, it's got to be a duck. I can't sit here and watch all these casualty updates every single day regarding children, or regarding cultural locations, educational establishments. I can't hear from the Russian Federation's news teams themselves, like RIA Novosti, Russia 1, RIZ, RT, Ruptly, or the State Duma, or the Kremlin, or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I can't sit here and listen to them talking about the re-education of Ukrainian children, or to watch the State Duma from their own database as we get them translated, push laws for the forced deportation of Ukrainian children and orphans, which is also once again against the Geneva Conventions and is under the Rome Statute as being something of genocide. I cannot sit here and look at the filtration camps every single day. I cannot sit here and listen to these reports and now listen to this and think anything different. This is a genocide done poorly. That is what this is. This is a genocide. The Russians are committing genocide. I don't need the International Criminal Court to tell me that. I do not need prosecutions to tell me that. I was very lucky to not be around for World War II and to see the Holocaust. But I've read quite a bit on it. One of the most powerful books I have ever read was Night by Elie Wiesel. One of the other most powerful books I've ever read was Hiroshima. I've read Night by Elie Wiesel when I went to the Holocaust Museum. And I've walked through and seen all of the very terrible things that are there within it. And I have read and watched extensively about the Rwandan genocide. I've read about the breakup of Yugoslavia, the ethnic cleansing between the Serbs and the Bosnians. And I told myself, I'm really happy that I was born in a different era. I was born after all this stuff had happened. And then I get this. And then we get to experience this all together. This puts things at a whole different level. And the Russians aren't going to succeed, but it will be damaging for some time for the Ukrainians. And it'll be something that should never be forgotten. But the call for ethnic cleansing inside of downtown Donetsk is just the nail in the coffin for me. If there was ever finally that's it, that's it. That one's it. It's just a genocide now. Russian strikes are occurring here at Krasnohorivka. That's over here by the Donetsk area. This comes as the Russian forces are continuing to try and push back Ukrainian forces, which are on the outskirts of Donetsk, which is a very key and strategic city within this area. But what we see here is that rockets ended up striking residential, private industrial, and sports complexes here in Krasnohorivka. Once again, this is not a military target. None of those things are a military target. Magic carpet ride. Now, I really find flying I really want to go get my pilot's license and get my helicopter pilot's license. For those that don't know, I think it would be awesome, but it's very expensive, which is why I haven't done it yet. They got a lot of other things I would like to do beforehand, and that's kind of just a bucket list thing. But I get to at least live vicariously through these Ukrainian pilots. These are a couple of Ukrainian pilots here in the Donbass. They're flying their MI8 on Nap of the Earth flight. Nap of the Earth is when you're in between. You have your high and mid-level flights, which are like, you're kind of you're above everything. You don't have to worry about obstacles. And then you have contour flight. You're kind of flying just above the terrain, 30 to 50 meters, And then you have Nap of the Earth. Nap of the Earth means that you're beside the tree. You're not above the tree, you're beside the tree. And we've seen the skill of these Ukrainian pilots. They know their aircraft, their airframes so well. And it's just insane to think about how good of pilots these guys have been throughout this war. I mean, numerically, they're a complete disadvantage, but they are extremely, extremely effective with what they got. And now here's some footage. This is from some Nap of the Earth flight by some Ukrainian helicopters here within the Donbass for you guys, right out of the cockpit. Man, I cannot wait to get my helicopter's pilot's license at some point in time. Jump up here to Dnipro, 5 for 5. So, this is where 5 missiles were apparently shot at the city of Dnipro. And all 5 of them failed to reach their target as they were shot down by Ukrainian air defenses before they could reach it. Quote, on September 3rd, Ukrainian Air Defense Forces shot down 5 Russian missiles in the Dniprovetsk Oblast. And that's coming from Valentin Reznichenko, the head of the Donetsk region, or the Dniprovetsk, Regional Military Administration. Take a look at some of these photos here. There's that initial photo for you guys. Very obviously a downed missile. But even better, here is from the Ukrainian Air Force. So, 5 caliber cruise missiles, all shot down. Not a single successful strike. Jump down here into Melitopol, where the Melitopol airfield is ablaze right now. This comes after... so everything's on fire, essentially. This comes after Ukrainian forces struck a Russian command, control, and logistical structures there. Melitopol, if you can't tell by the map, is a very strategic location. A lot of major roadways and railheads run through Melitopol. It's a very centralized location, which means it can support both the Zaporizhzhia Oblast and the Kherson Oblast. And it means that it's a very huge hub to kind of transport through and to control everything out of. One of the ways they do that is actually through the Melitopol airport here, this airfield. And it has been struck several times now, and we're continuing to see it struck once again. ShamRocks, welcome back, and they ask, shot down with what, Nassams? I do not know. I do not know what they were shot down with. They didn't disclose that, and I don't blame them either. I wouldn't want to disclose what I used to shoot down your fancy missiles. If I had something that could do that effectively, I probably wouldn't tell you what it was. So I wish I could answer that, but I just can't. Over here, the ZNPP, or the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant, is currently running off of reserve power. According to the IAEA, or the International Atomic Energy Administration report, Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant lost connection to the last external power line. Reserve is working. The insider at Russia managed to obtain visual proof that Russia has been shelling Ukrainian positions from the power plant. The footage from September 2nd shows Russian MLRS operating from the vicinity of the power plant, and the geolocation was confirmed by Bellingcat. And take a look at some of this. This is some thermal imaging. And you can see there's the smokestacks from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and you can see those MLRS systems firing there in the distance. You can see that whole stream. This is a BM-21 Grad system, more than likely 40 rounds of Katyusha rockets. that Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And so here's that footage. Once again, here's a still from that footage. And that is the main, and that is it without thermal imaging. With thermal imaging? Not thermal imaging. Crazy. Yeah, there's a Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Yeah, you don't use nuclear power plants for military facilities, as it turns out. And Russia is the only country in the world to have ever done so. Why? Because shooting back at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant could cause the complete destruction of said power plant, a nuclear meltdown, and Ukraine knows better than anybody what would happen during a nuclear meltdown, seeing as Chernobyl is within Ukraine. The destruction of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and a meltdown there, to give you an idea, essentially the totality of Ukraine would be engulfed in what is essentially a nuclear radioactive wasteland, basically the exclusion zone for Chernobyl, except it envelops all of Ukraine. And then it also envelops quite a large amount of Russia, Crimea, Moldova essentially is completely affected, and into areas of Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland, and Belarus. A large swath of Europe would be affected and have exclusion zones in them. Another large swath of Europe, even past that, would be also affected, but wouldn't be so radioactive that it would have to be completely excluded, at least not for a long duration of time. Part of it depends on wind, but in general, it's the largest nuclear reactor in Europe. So shooting back at this thing is a terrible idea. So it makes a perfect location for the Russians to put their military facility there, because they can't be shot at. Technically, they shouldn't be shot at it anyway. And then if they were also to bomb their said location and happen to disable the power grid, which means they would have to link it with the Russian power grid, then you could also kind of kill two birds with one stone. You could then link up your power grid to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, cutting it off from the Ukrainian power grid, the nuclear power plant. And that way that Ukraine no longer has any kind of control over the flow of electricity to it and what any electricity it would be getting from it. But Crimea and Russia would be getting all of that electricity. And then you also have the added effect of being able to blame Ukraine, as Ukraine... Because who would shell their own military forces and who would shell a nuclear power plant? But the Ukrainians. I mean, who else would do that? Yeah, right? I mean, we don't have military targets there, but Ukraine's shelling it. Why else? I mean, who else would do that? I can't imagine who else would be willing to shell their own troops and a nuclear power plant at the same time. There's Cyber says maybe they can send special ops teams to blow those systems up. I'm gonna guess and say probably not. Just because logistically it's not very viable, and two, it doesn't make a lot of sense to. This area is too hot of a topic for anybody to risk something like that. And besides, the IAEA is there, and that's not something I would want to do if there is an international group currently there, considering they already proved the fact that the Russians have military equipment inside of the facility. But yeah, logistically, it's just not a super viable option. It's too risky. There's not enough reward out of it either. Once again, the OODA loop. But Russian rocket strikes did kill a 9-year-old child here, and this is in Zelenodolska, which is located here in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Quote, the Russian occupiers shelled Zelenodolsko community in the Dnipropetrovsk region on September 3rd. A 9-year-old boy was killed. 10 citizens were injured. Local high-rise buildings, shops, a kindergarten, lyceums, and administrative service center, or the ASC, were damaged. That's coming once again from Valentin Reznichenko, who's the head of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Administration. That brings us into the Kherson area. Kherson has been where a significant amount of the fighting has been taking place over the last few days, roughly 6 days. And it's been quite a successful 6 days. There's been a lot of developments, very bitter fighting on both sides, very bloody fighting for both sides. But we have a couple of major developments that have taken place. First of all, this is the fact that the Novokakhovka dam bridge has officially collapsed completely. We do have satellite imagery. It shows the complete collapse of these bridge sections, meaning they are no longer usable in any way, shape, or form. So once again, the Russians reaffirming that the Russians are completely cut off. This was their last hope. And that's because there is a dam here. And to destroy the dam is to also unleash the river of the Dnipro downriver and possibly flood out areas of Kherson and many other communities. It's a very dangerous game to play. But the HIMARS system, which is accurate up to and within 1 meter, which is between me and my camera, is very effective. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. But reaffirmation that the Russians are completely cut off north of the Dnipro River. Jump over here. The Antonovsky Bridge was once again struck. As per usual, it seems that Ukraine is making sure to strike this daily now. The efforts to construct a pontoon bridge have stopped. Whether that's as a result of constantly being under bombardment, or whether that is because the Dnipro River is extremely fast flowing. It's also has to deal with tidal. It's also a tidal river because of its location near the Black Sea. So what you end up getting is it's very difficult to build a pontoon bridge across this. So and they have to rely on ferries and air and getting air resupplies right now. But this was once again struck. You can see that attempt to build over here just isn't working. It seems to have halted. And there you go. It would appear that is coming from the Antonovsky Bridge area. It's not the only thing that seems to have happened. A Pantsir S1 was actually destroyed today, or at least recently, I should say. Video footage showed the Pantsir SAM system destroyed on the outskirts of Kherson over by the Antonovsky Bridge. The radar system was extended, meaning that this was likely an operation when it destroyed, and it was attempting to shoot down any incoming rockets that were going to strike this area. So it means that this proves that Ukraine is targeting air defense systems actively. Whether that is to improve their hit chances on some of these vital locations for the Russians, or whether that is so that way they can clear up the skies a little bit and gain some air superiority in this area. That allows for their aircraft to conduct close air support, a more accurate gun runs and rocket runs and bombing missions over this area, and support of ground forces. It doesn't matter either way. It's a very good indicator that these are being targeted extensively. When you take a look at that here. We got some photos of that too. That is the Pantsir on its side. Not looking so hot. That is destroyed. And that brings us up. And we take a look over here. Day 5's successful strikes. Today is day 6 of the Kherson counteroffensive, which began on August the 29th. But what we see is that, quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed Russian 152mm self-propelled howitzer 2A-65 Mista B, 120mm mobile radar or mobile mortar system, 3 152mm howitzer or gun howitzers, a pontoon bridge, and a commanded observation post near the village of Kozatsky, and 3 enemy ammunition depots in the Kherson and Berislav regions on September the 2nd. That's coming from Operational Command South. Once again, we see Ukrainian Air Force conducting operations here in support of ground forces within the Kherson Oblast. And of course, this comes once again as pretty heavy casualties and significant fighting has been occurring on both sides. So once again, Ukrainian close air support operating along the front lines here. We also see that someone's crossing the Inhulets River. So this is, or that Ukrainian troops are crossing the Inhulets River. This Ukrainian soldier recorded himself crossing that Inhulets. And in the background, we see a destroyed British Husky tactical support vehicle, which is an MRAP.
Итак, мы форсировали речку Ингул.
Keep in mind, this has been, even though that there are some successes for the Ukrainians, this is a very difficult fight for them. This is a huge gamble. They did apparently war game with the United States prior to launching this offensive to try and mitigate and kind of have some tools in their toolbox before they started this. But it is a very difficult fight. It's a very bloody fight on both sides. There are significant casualties on both sides. We've even aired some of those here. But it is still being successful. It is still ongoing. Does not seem that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has just completely fallen apart, as many Russian sources seem to suggest. But it does seem that it has been very bloody. I will admit to that. And to emphasize on that, the things I have seen. So, war really changes you as a person. And the combat here is very difficult to describe. And the thing is that this Ukrainian soldier, you can tell, it doesn't matter what battles he may have fought in prior to this. It doesn't matter what battles he will fight in after. This is the moment that changes him as a human being. This is the moment that changes him forever. Just take a look. This is a Ukrainian soldier coming from the Kherson Oblast today. This is the moment that he has changed. No matter what has come before, and no matter what will happen afterwards, this man has seen some things. This man is now changed completely for the rest of his life, without a doubt in my mind. Finally, we jump over here to the Mykolaiv Oblast. Rocket strikes did kill a child today here in the Mykolaiv region. Quote, rocket attacks on the Mykolaiv region on September 3rd. An 8-year-old child was killed. 6 citizens were injured, including 2 children. Local residential buildings were damaged. That's coming from Hanna Zamazayeva, who is the head of the Mykolaiv Regional Council. And that is everything inside of the country of Ukraine. But that doesn't mean that that's the end of the news. There's plenty of other stuff ongoing, including some stuff coming out of Russia. So we can jump over there and take a look here very quickly. And what we end up seeing is that Russian propagandists keep turning narratives on their heads. And so the translations to this is that Soviet labor camps has the goal of re-educating. European concentration camps had the goal of destroying your personality and then break you up into parts. They don't see us as people. We have been dehumanized. Take a look. This is them talking about gulags. My understanding is that some of this gets cut off for you guys, so I might just keep this small screened and just kind of zoom in here for you.
В советских лагерях ты назывался, кто ты и какая у тебя статья. Ты был индивидуален. В немецких концлагерях у тебя не было личности. Советский лагерь ставил задачу перевоспитать. Как бы ни понимали, немецкий концлагерь, европейский концлагерь ставил задачу уничтожить тебя сначала как личность, а потом разобрать на составляющие. Когда сейчас наследники нацистской идеи в Европе говорят о нас как о борках, говорят о нас как о гражданах России, все, которые должны ответить, они идут этим путем, они не видят в нас личности, они не видят в нас людей. Расчеловечивание. Отказ нам в праве быть собой. Вот это принципиальное отличие нас от них. Зараженные нацизмом Украина не видит нас людей. Для них мы орки, рашисты. А мы-то их все равно жалеем. Мы их считаем все равно нашими, но заблудшими. Со свинченной головой. Мы ненавидим грех, но не грешника. Поэтому и победим. Потому что мы людей видим. Мы за душу боремся.
I don't think you fight for someone's soul by killing them. Also, as a little note there, considering he's talking about how, you know, the Soviet labor camps, they knew your name. And under which law you were imprisoned. You know, he's talking about, yo, yeah, our gulags, they were so, you know, they knew us by name. They were friendly guards. You know, you just did your time. And it's the conservative estimates for the number of people that died in Russian gulags is 1.4 million. So let's not get that narrative twisted here. 1.4 million Soviets died in Soviet labor camps while in captivity. And that number is only not higher because the Soviets typically released individuals from the gulag near the brink of death or suffering from incurable disease. So that number is the conservative figure. It is considered to be much higher. 14 million people were imprisoned in Russian gulags. Anywhere from 1.4 to about 1.7 of them, or over 10% of them, died while in captivity. So let's not get that narrative twisted. They didn't know you by name. No one cared about you. You were in Siberia, freezing and starving to death. Stalin was not a nice guy. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, Stalin was hated by even the people in his party. And the only reason they didn't say anything and waited for him to have a heart attack and finally die is because they knew he would kill them. Because he purged his entire government and his military. Like, there's nothing good about a gulag. If you were in a gulag, no one gave a shit about you. They left you there to die. They didn't know your name. They just knew that you were there. Because they were probably going to shoot you on sight if you tried to escape. Another news coming out of Moscow is the fact that Nord Stream 1 has officially shut down indefinitely. This came from Gazprom, who officially announced the indefinite shutdown of the key gas line. This comes after, of course, the Gazprom leader, Alexander Toylukov, was found dead in his home after the day after the invasion of Ukraine on February 25th. And also, immediately after earlier this week, Ravil Maganov, who is the head of one of Russia's largest oil companies, Lukoil, died after he mysteriously fell out of a hospital window earlier this week. Ravil Maganov had actually openly criticized the war in Ukraine and Putin's government prior to his death. This pipeline is extremely important for Europe. Without it, Europeans, unless they find alternatives and quickly, will freeze this winter as winter is fast approaching. It is already September the 3rd, and winter and that weather there in Europe is about to turn very cold very soon. Over here in Izhevsk, which is in the Udmurt Republic of Russia, a man threw Molotov cocktails at a police station and wounded 2 officers during his arrest. 25-year-old Rustam M. tried to set fire to the local police department that night. He threw 4 Molotov cocktails, one of them hitting the entrance. When the criminal began to be detained, he pulled out a knife and wounded 2 employees. They were taken to the City Clinical Hospital number 1. One is in serious condition. The police had opened fire. 8 shots were fired in total. The attacker was wounded. And that leads us over here into Europe. Over in Prague, which is in Czechia, mass rallies were held demanding the resignation of the government. Roughly about 70,000 people gathered in Prague's main city square.
Ne této vládě, ne NATO, ne USA. Stačí se jen postavit a jejich hra končí. Odchod z NATO, z EU, lidské burzy, emisních povolenek, Green Dealu.
And as you can see, just the sheer number of people at those rallies. I mean, 70,000 people is quite a large number of people that is requesting for the resignation of that government. It's a little bit of turmoil there in Prague tonight. Jump over here to the United Kingdom, where Ukrainian troops are being trained by British and Allied instructors, learning the basics of anti-armor warfare, actually. This is an invaluable skill to the Ukrainians, as Russian forces are completely built on motorized and mechanized warfare, maintaining no light infantry units within their military. We got some photos coming from the Ministry of Defense here. Something else I keep seeing, and I would like to keep pointing out, they are wearing, of course, they're wearing their equipment, their NATO equipment, right? But they're also using the L85, which is the United Kingdom's service rifle. It's a bullpup rifle. But they're using the United Kingdom's equipment. They're not training on stuff that is their own, which I think is very interesting to take a look at, because it makes me wonder, is this stuff that they are getting issued and then they will be taking with them when they leave? That is a very important question that I need the answer to. but I probably won't be getting. But you can see they're learning the basics of anti-armor warfare. They're hunting down in or they're currently operating hunting in teams throughout this. As the in-law right there, or the new light anti-armored weapon. Very effective so far in the war in Ukraine. They definitely have a ton of in-laws that have been used throughout the duration of this war, and we will continue to see them used. But very good. That is an invaluable skill. Anti-armor warfare is very difficult. Obviously, really squishy, small guys, easy targets versus a multi-million-dollar death machine that has like a meter thick worth of armor if you include the slope angle. Very dangerous game. Very, very dangerous game. Very difficult to learn how to engage properly, but very important. And it's definitely something that you can definitely make second nature. And fighting the Russians, keep in mind, these guys are brand new recruits. These aren't Ukrainian soldiers that have been fighting on the front lines and then they went to the United Kingdom and then they're going back. These are guys, they are brand new recruits. They're going through NATO-style training, and they're going to be shipped back to Ukraine at the end of their training cycle, and they're going to be sent to the front lines, and that's when they're going to get their experience. These guys don't have any experience yet, but this training is invaluable. This is a war that NATO has been preparing for since the Cold War began, since the end of World War II. The fall of the Nazis immediately began the beginning of the Cold War. And this is a war that has been something that everyone has trained for and has been preparing for a long time. And the United States, we know the training is effective. We know that the tactics and the weapons are effective. The United States and other allied countries went into Ukraine since 2014 when training, doing rotations. I had some friends in the Marine Corps that actually went to Ukraine and trained Ukrainians on how to use the Javelin and other weapon systems that they were giving them, and training with them, showing them tactics. And you can see that working very effectively in the country so far with just that minimal kind of training events that were ongoing. These guys are getting full-fledged NATO training. Like, they are learning how we would operate. And then they're going to go onto the battlefield and onto the battle space, possibly with the gear that they are being issued in training. That's an open option still. And that is going to be invaluable to the Ukrainians. That experience, that kind of training, those kind of tactics and skills are going to prove very effective for the Ukrainians, I think. They're going to be outclassing their Russian counterparts in many ways. Jump down here where this is over in Israel. The Israeli army, or the IDF, is going to be receiving the new generation of the Merkava 5 Barak. And the Merkava 5... So for those that don't know, the Merkava series of tanks is my absolute favorite tank. I love the Merkavas. The Merkava is probably the coolest tank in the world. First of all, it looks like an alien spaceship. Secondly, it's a tank, but it's also an armored personnel carrier. Instead of mounting, 7.62 coaxial guns and, top-mounted, technically air defense guns, which would be, like a 50 cal or, something similar. No, they have a 20 millimeter cannon. They literally have things on the back of their turrets called Predator chains that stop RPG rounds. Like, this thing coming at you, it has a really high profile for a tank, but it's a beast. This thing, it can carry a full team, like a reinforced team, basically like a team plus of guys in the back, fully loaded, like on top of the crew. So it's a tank. It's an armored personnel carrier. It's heavily armored. It has a 125 millimeter main gun, I believe. It's super effective. I believe it's even got a rifled barrel as opposed to a smoothbore. Don't quote me on that one. I gotta double check that. But so in 2023, they will begin receiving this new generation of the Merkava 5. They currently have Merkava 3 and 4, which is already in their arsenal. But over the next year, the Merkava 5 Barak tanks will go into service with the armored forces of the Israeli Defense Forces. They're equipped with a trophy active protection system against anti-tank missiles, which is much like the Arena cast for the Russians, except they will actually probably maintain this one, as well as night and day vision cameras. A new fire control system has been developed for the Merkava 5 Barak, which makes it possible to direct and destroy enemy targets in the shortest possible time. The Merkava 5 Barak will also be equipped with the new anti-electronic warfare system. This thing is terrifying. This tank is terrifying to think about. The Israelis are surrounded by countries that hate them. And as a result, they have developed some very terrifying military capabilities, the Merkava being one of those. This is not a tank I would want to go up against. This is not something I would want to fight. This is not... No. Now, if it's on my side, yeah. Oh, yeah. I feel safe at night with those things, sleeping beside those things. Those things are awesome. Once again, my favorite tank in the world. Jump over here, and over the past week, 14 Islamic State's attacks have occurred in areas such as Raqqa and the Raqqa, Asaka, and Deir ez-Zor provinces in Syria. All of these were against Syrian soldiers and members of the PKK. Twice Syrian military vehicles attacked near the Tabqa airfield, killing 4 soldiers and injuring several more. And terrorists also shot 1 military vehicle near the city of Ain Issa in the north of Raqqa. As a result, 1 soldier was killed and his comrade was wounded. This is the first attack by Islamists in the area for a very long time, as the Battle of Raqqa was extremely difficult, and it was a Islamic State stronghold that was very much cleared or bombed into submission, however you want to look at it. At the same time, the Islamic State fighters attacked BKK members in the districts of Karama, Matakar, and Mansoura, as well as the city of Raqqa itself. Also, many attacks occurred in different parts of the province of Deir ez-Zor, including a raid on the headquarters of Kurdish formations in the settlement of Azar and the Busira region. In addition, the Islamists reported the murder of one of the members of the BKK in the Sur district, who arrived at the place of death by deceit, and later his body was found by local residents. In general, about 20 Kurdish security forces have been killed and wounded. Now, this is happening, and we got a photo of one of those attacks there. Now, the reason this is happening all at once, we are in September now, and we're getting ready to roll into the autumn and winter, and there is a fighting season. Now, combat operations happen year-round, don't get me wrong, but believe it or not, Syria is probably one of the places I have been the most bone-chilling cold in my life. The winter, I did a winter deployment to Syria, and there's a fighting season and then an off-season for a lot of these Middle Eastern countries and for a lot of these groups. So here in Syria, they will fight throughout the summer, throughout the later spring and the summertime and early fall. But mid to late fall, the winter, and then early spring, their combat operations, there isn't a lot of them. They mostly are just doing things to remind everybody, hey, we're still around. It's not nearly as kinetic for them, and that's so those deployments are usually a little bit less kinetic. If you're in the Middle East, winter deployments in general are a little bit less kinetic. The summer deployments are the ones where the fighting really is ramped up. That is their fighting season, and they will continue to do so. And that's where you see a lot of their operations. Don't know why, but it's also their wet season in the wintertime. You get a lot of sandstorms. You get a lot of rain. I've seen it snow in Syria before. You get a lot of sandstorms, which completely blinds you. It's just kind of a difficult environment to work in. It's also it's also very cold. And sometimes it will sandstorm and rain at the same time. I've seen it rain mud before. That's a very interesting experience. If you've never lived through that, yeah, it's a very interesting experience to watch it rain mud. It gets into everything. It's extremely annoying. But yeah. So that's kind of why you're going to see a lot of activity over the next couple of weeks as this fighting season rolls up, kind of begins to end, because they're trying to get that one last hurrah in before they finish the fighting season, kind of wind down for the winter. Brings us over to Afghanistan. This is up here in the northern part of Afghanistan, up by Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, where the Taliban actually ended up killing an Uzbekistani citizen. And the incident occurred yesterday in the province of Faryab. Sorry, the Taliban reportedly opened fire on Mulavi Homadi as they led search operations. He died on the spot from his injuries. What exactly the Pashtun nationalists suspected the man of is still unclear. It is known about Hamadi that he was an imam and had been on Afghan territory as a refugee for about 5 years. And here in the rest of Afghanistan, we see that women are currently protesting the closure of girls' schools. A number of women protesters protesting the closure of girls' schools as they say the closure of girls' schools is the height of ignorance. They asked the international community to put pressure on the Taliban to reopen the schools. The Taliban are slowly but surely re-rolling out their Sharia law, much like they had in their caliphate prior to the United States invasion in 2001 and 2002, which saw the destruction of the original Taliban power and the Taliban caliphate here. They said that they were a changed group. Really, they are trying to portray themselves as a changed group, but slowly but surely they're re-implementing a lot of things that they originally had to begin with before the United States invaded the country and bombed them into oblivion, and then they resurged.
مسدود نگه داشتن درب مکاتب دختران اوج جهالت است. با باز نمودن درب مکاتب دختران به جهالت خود خاتمه دهید.
ما یک خاتون افغان هستم و ما در ترکیه زیر دولت طالبان زندگی مونیم و شما خواهش مونیم تا مکتب دختران را باز کنیم.
د انجونو د ښوونځي تړل د ټولنې د جهالت او تیارو نښه ده.
من یک زن افغان هستم.
And so all around the country, they're giving these speeches in protest about the closure of girls' schools. And they're trying to get the United States and other Western countries to put a lot more pressure on the Taliban regarding keeping them to their word of their changed group. However, the Taliban keeps that, we don't know. A gun shop caught fire is now, the ammunition is detonating inside of it up here in the country of Kazakhstan. The Ministry of Emergency Situations said that the fire area is more than 2,000 square meters. And of course, in the course of the burning, the flame spread to the roof of the nearest building. According to local media, the fire has also engulfed 8 private houses and 2 cars. At the moment, it is known that there's 1 dead and 7 injured. Previously, 2 people can be seen in the basement of the store. At the moment, due to the detonation of ammunition, firefighters cannot access them. Emergency services are on site. Quite an extensive fire here. Yeah, it's not a good situation. Jump down here, and in India, India has commissioned its first home-built aircraft carrier amid its rivalry with China. On Friday, India commissioned the first home-built aircraft carrier, joining a small club of countries capable of building aircraft carriers and using them to project power far from their shores. The $2.5 billion INS Vikrant, built at a shipyard in Kochi in southern India, is a product of an 18-year design and manufacturing process that has been repeatedly delayed. But the ship is coming into service in the South Asian nation, the world's 3rd highest military spender, shifts its focus away from land conflicts with its traditional enemy Pakistan and focuses more on the Indo-Pacific fought over by maritime powers, including its main rival, China. And as we get over into the Indo-Pacific region, we take a look at Taiwan. Taiwan is going to be buying 4 American MQ-9B Sea Guardian reconnaissance and strike drones for the amount of $555 million USD. The contract with General Atomics was signed on August 24th, 2022. This is reported by Wang Ting-yu of the Democratic Progressive Party. The Taiwanese military will receive 4 drones worth NT 16.88 billion or $555 million. The MQ-9B Sea Guardian will be deployed in the Hualien country. In total, Taiwan will spend $21.7 billion or $710 million USD. Additional costs will be required for infrastructure and control stations, as well as for the training of military personnel and the purchase of related equipment. The first drone will arrive in Taiwan in 2025. As you jump over here into Somalia, more than 30 people were killed during an al-Shabaab attack. During the attack, the militants associated with the al-Qaeda-linked al-Shabaab group killed more than 30 civilians. Dozens were injured. The incident occurred on the night of September 2nd through the 3rd in the province of Hiran. Jihadists fired at a convoy that was transporting food to Ethiopian-controlled forces Mahas district. After the attack, the terrorists burned all vehicles. And as we jump over here and into North America, what we see is that up here in Tupelo, Mississippi, a pilot hijacked an airplane, threatened to smash the plane into the local Walmart supercenter. The Tupelo police said that the store had been evacuated following the threat. The pilot later headed north before eventually touching down in the field near Ripley, Mississippi, about 45 miles northwest of Tupelo. After Patterson was arrested, Tupelo Mayor Todd Jordan called the resolution the best case scenario. The mayor says he hopes Patterson will get the help he needs. The pilot has since been identified as Corey Patterson of Shannon, Mississippi. Patterson was employed fueling planes at the Tupelo Regional Airport, giving him access to the twin-engine plane. That is his flight path there. And that is the plane on the ground after it crashed into an open field. Once again, we have to ask ourselves, is the third time the charm? Artemis 1 mission to the moon has been postponed once again. During the tanking or filling the fuel tanks of the Artemis 1 mission, a leak developed in the supply side of the 8-inch quick disconnect while attempting to transfer fuel to the rocket. Teams attempted to fix the issue related to the leak in hardware and transferring fuel into the rocket, but were unsuccessful. Over the next several days, teams will establish access to the area of the leak on Launch Pad 39B, and in parallel, conduct a schedule assessment to provide additional data that will inform a decision on whether to perform work to replace the seal, either at the pad, where it can be tested under cryogenic conditions, or inside the vehicle assembly building. Because of the complex orbital mechanics involved in launching to the moon, NASA would have to have launched the Artemis 1 by Tuesday, September 6th, as part of the current launch period. The next attempt is reportedly going to be on Monday. That is the Artemis 1 rocket system there, sitting on its launch pad. So this is the full live stream. I believe this is the full 120. Sorry, it's their update. It's 59 minutes long, so we're not going to go over that here. But if you want to watch all 59 minutes of the update, yeah, it's all there for you. And here's also the article regarding it. So they ended up scrubbing this launch attempt. The thing is that NASA really doesn't want a repeat of something like Challenger. Even though there's nobody on board, this is a big deal for them. This is a big deal for mankind. They want to get it right the first time, and I don't think anybody is willing to say that. Now, the good news is that the seal appears to be not on the rocket. That's not where the issue appears to be. It appears to be on the actual connecting portion. That quick disconnect, it doesn't seem to be sealing correctly to the rocket to fuel it. They did remedy the one that they had earlier, so they were able to fix that issue with the rocket, but they weren't able with, I think that was on Monday. But they weren't able, but this one, they tried to fix it multiple times. They tried to let it heat up. They tried to do a whole bunch of stuff. It just wasn't seating correctly, and so now they're hoping to kind of fix that. But they said that so they said that working with hydrogen like this is very difficult. They say that these fuel types are very difficult to work with, and so they're taking an abundance of caution with it. So that's kind of that was at least what we were hearing from NASA Live earlier today. But they said that they were taking it very slow. They're trying to be careful with it. It's very difficult substances to work with. But overall, I can't blame them for scrubbing it. I'd much rather them take the time that they need, fix these issues, identify them now while it's an unmanned rocket, while they're kind of getting their feet wet. It's the very first launch of this missile, of this rocket type. And I'd rather them take this time, as they should be with this test rocket. The Artemis 1 is a test rocket. It's their test. They're going to test all of the internal components of it remotely within the crew cabins and everything else. I'd rather them take the time to do that than to, try and rush through this because they want to get the launch over with and they want to show something for their work, and something end up going wrong further down the line when there are people inside and people's lives are at risk. I'd much rather they take the time now to fix these issues so that later missions have a much easier time and are much safer overall. And to wrap up the news for the night, we actually go over here. This is in Catania, which is in Italy, technically Sicily. And what we take a look at here is that a woman has given birth after a uterus transplant. A woman gave birth to a child after a uterus transplant. The incident was the first of its kind in Italy. She underwent surgery as part of a pilot program in Catania in 2020, and in February 2022, she found out she was pregnant. The newborn girl is named Alessandra. This name was given to her by her parents in honor of the woman who became the organ donor after her death. Alessandra was born premature in the 34th week of pregnancy and weighs 1.7 kilograms or 3.7 pounds. The woman is positive for COVID and had cesarean after a bout of fever. The mother and daughter are currently in hospital, and the doctors say the conditions of both are stable.
Salve, sono in ripresa, mi sto riprendendo e non vedo l'ora di uscire dal Covid per andare a vedere la mia piccola e abbracciarla. Salve.
So a little bit of happy news, and also happy birthday, Alessandra. Welcome to the world. But that is the news for the night. And there's been a ton of stuff going on. There's a lot of big events happening. We have, the Kherson offensive. We have the end of the fighting season. We have the war in Ethiopia. We have the training exercises and the hostilities ongoing within the South China Sea. We have natural disasters and climate change and the Artemis 1 rockets and everything else ongoing throughout the world. There's just a ton of really big events happening all at once. It's kind of overwhelming at times, and at least I get that way. I know I certainly do. I'm sitting here like, man, how do I keep up with all of this? But we still soldier on nonetheless. And the good thing is that we continue to soldier on and continue to do these news streams for a good reason, because we want to be the news that gives back. Once again, we're never doing any kind of super chats. We're never doing any kind of merchandising or any of that. None of this will ever go. I will never see a dime from this news stream. Ever. Never want to. Because we don't want to profit off of people's misery. We want to help people. So 100% of everything we do will always remain for charity. Everything we do will be to continue to improve this and charity and do charities and continue to help people throughout the world. So please check out the video description. Please check out the video description. And please give your support to those awesome organizations below. We just added 2 more, Ripley's Heroes and Feed the Children, to support both. The Ripley's Hero supports guys in Ukraine and giving them non-lethal military aid, while Feed the Children assists impoverished groups inside of the United States and also in South Central America and Africa as well. So please give your support to all of the organizations, though. And if you can't give lots of these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. The best way that you can help us, if you can't give anything to these organizations, to help with this project is to, you know, let other people know about us. Help us grow this thing. More people that are here, the more of an impact we as a community will have. And I want to be able to help a lot of people. So that means we need a lot of impact. So please continue to give your support to us if you can. And continue to let other people know about us. Share us on social media. All of our links are in the description below. You can check out our website and find this map on there for you guys. Also, you can join our Discord community. If you have any more links for different organizations, jump on Discord, let a staff member know, and give us that link, give us a short summary. We'll go through our vetting process, and hopefully it will get added here onto the stream as long as it passes all of our criteria. And so with that, I hope that you guys remain safe, that your family and your friends remain safe, and if not, I hope you find that safety and security in the very near future. Please enjoy your wonderful Sunday. Hope you get a lot of nice rest for this Sunday. And if you're in the United States, I hope that you're enjoying your Labor Day weekend. But with that, my name is Paul from the New News, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your night.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас слать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлейфуйло. Тут для них нема нічого, крім труни. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бочок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkled bum. I will come and help you fit it in your skull.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріля до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Ідіть нахуй.